welcome to the Kaiju is in the Details. I'm Ian.
I'm Haru.
And this is it, folks. This is the one you've been waiting for. It's Godzilla, 1954's Gojira.
We've been building up to this one. And... Oh my god, did it pay off.
So I take it you liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, we watched a few movies that I would call classics. You know, like King Kong would fit into that.
Yeah, I would even say them as a classic, although I didn't like it as much as I like King Kong.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Like, them felt very... I don't know. It was very memorable.
Unlike the monster from the whatever floor, ocean floor?
Yeah, the monster from the ocean floor. But, like, honestly, even King Kong doesn't compare to Godzilla.
Yeah,
like,
right? Godzilla, I think King Kong, you might say, has better effects. I would be willing to go that far. But atmosphere-wise, you cannot beat Godzilla.
Yeah.
Atmosphere, writing, acting, it's impeccable.
Yep.
And like the thing about that is that, like, yeah, King Kong wins on effects, but like it's a movie, it's all fake anyways, right? And this is like something that American audiences don't get. Like, they're like too cynical about this kind of thing. But like Japanese audiences are much more willing to just be like, because like if you look at the difference between American theater and Japanese theater, right? American theater use a lot of normal effects. You get too weird, like Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, and then people start going, "Oh, this is corny. This is cheesy," you know. Whereas Japanese theater has a lot of masks, like just literally wooden masks and representational things, and this transfers to theater, to film as well. Not to say that like Japanese audiences are like significantly different from American audiences, especially now. I think nowadays a lot of things have transitioned more towards the Hollywood standard. It's just that back then, I think Japanese audiences were a lot more open to effects that weren't so good, especially when it was coming from a home theater, like a not a Hollywood studio film, but a Toho studio film. So there's certain allowances you give when it's like coming from a studio that's like at risk of being destroyed by American studios at any moment, you know.
Yeah, like, yeah, there were a lot of scenes where with Godzilla just like stomping on the city, where it was very obviously just like a guy in a suit stepping on like a model of Tokyo City. But like
the thing is, it's a really good suit and really good models.
Yeah, it like, as obvious as it is, I don't care, because
it looks fucking great.
Yeah.
And I honestly think this movie does benefit a lot from the black and white. It helps hide a lot of the problems with the suit, and especially the hand puppet. I think the hand puppet's the weakest effect in the movie.
Yeah.
Hand puppet Godzilla kind of looks dog.
Yeah.
It's not great.
He kind of looks very derpy.
Especially when he closes his mouth.
Yeah.
I should mention, I'm going to call Godzilla a he. I think Haru's probably going to end up doing this too, because culturally, as Americans, we refer to Godzilla as a he a lot. Godzilla in the movie is never gendered. Godzilla is a creature and an it.
We love our non-binary representation, Godzilla.
Exactly. Godzilla, not a person.
He's just like me for real.
Although Godzilla will develop some very human characteristics. Although in this film he's very much more bestial. Very much an animal.
Yeah.
Which was why the hand puppet is so important. So like, even though the hand puppet doesn't look very good, I think it's really important for creating the animalistic actions of Godzilla,
Mm-hmm.
because the suit can't emote very well.
Yeah.
This first suit for Godzilla is like hundreds of pounds.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
the like people almost die in Godzilla suits all the time, but this one in particular is the worst of them all. Like the actor passed out in the suit several times.
People dying while making old movies is just always, or not dying, but like almost dying while making old movies is just such a thing.
Yeah. And especially when it comes to the Godzilla suit, it's kind of cursed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna get to one later where we'll save it for that episode.
All right.
But suffice to say, a guy passes out. And,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I believe if I remember correctly, in this film, Godzilla, the first Godzilla film, there is an instance where the actor almost drowns.
Oh wow. Okay.
Because the ocean scenes are made using an actual pool.
Mm-hmm.
They built a giant pool at Toho Studios that they will use for the rest of the Godzilla films until they stop doing suit films.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pretty deep one because you got to have the Godzilla coming out of the ocean scenes.
Yeah.
And with a suit that heavy, you could end up stuck under the water.
Uh,
Yeah.
the
Luckily,
things we do for entertainment.
Haru Nakajima, that's the actor, by the way, he had a whole bunch of people around him to get him
Yeah.
out of the water. So yeah, I could talk all day about literally every aspect of this movie. I want you to kind of lead discussion because otherwise I will go off. And
So first thing that's striking about this movie, I mean, like I like when we started watching it, I told, like I said to you as we were watching the credits, like, oh my god, I'm already feeling hyped for this because even when there's nothing on the screen but the names of the people that made the movie, I can already feel the atmosphere being set, like the dramatic music and the roars of Godzilla, like
yeah, and the
even
footsteps.
like the movie hasn't even actually started yet, and you can already feel the tone of the movie. And like speaking of tone, so earlier I was comparing this to like King Kong, and like I would say to me the biggest difference with how I feel about King Kong versus how I feel about Godzilla is that I like Godzilla does so much of a better job at like portraying the tragedy of it of the story, and like really makes me feel for the plot, really makes me feel for the characters, really makes me feel for like the beast in question, although I did also kind of feel for King Kong too, but like
Yeah, I think King Kong's strength is in its beast.
yeah.
The beauty killed the beast, whatever. It makes you feel sorry for the creature, but it doesn't really make you feel for any of the other characters.
Yeah, but like this one, I could feel and understand the tragedy that these people are going through, and like even the scientist guy, who I feel if he had been done in any other way, I would not have really sympathized with him, but like he was a very sympathetic character here.
God, Dr. Serizawa. There's a reason why Serizawa is like a legend in the Godzilla franchise.
Mm-hmm.
He will show up, or characters named after him. He will never show up again,
Okay.
Dr.
Okay.
Serizawa. But characters named after him, either relatives or like literally when we go to the American Godzilla films, there'll be a new Dr. Serizawa in those series. But
Okay.
Serizawa is a name that comes back and again because of this incredible portrayal.
Mm-hmm.
It's really wonderful. I mean, like you when you first see Serizawa, right? It's like like a mad scientist with a big laboratory and an eye patch, right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh, this guy's like a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
But no, not at all. Akihiko Hirata does a fantastic job. We're going to see him again. A lot of these actors we'll see again. The Toho staple of actors is kind of stable a little bit. There's going to be people coming in and coming out, but like there's like a select group of actors that Toho Studios used for a lot of movies, and we're going to be seeing a lot of them come back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But he does a wonderful job of portraying this man burdened by knowledge.
Yeah. And like that is a common trope in a lot of especially science fiction media where
Mm-hmm.
like there's just this one guy who and like it usually is a guy who's like got his lifelong research that he's like dedicated everything to, and it's just like such a burden for him because he realizes what it can do if it gets into the wrong hands. And this portrayal of that trope is probably one of the most sympathetic ones I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I think this comes from two places. One, Ishiro Honda, the director, is I think we'll find this late in later films. It doesn't come through this one as much because of the topic of the film. But Ishiro Honda is a techno optimist. He believes that with the power of technology and science, humanity can overcome any obstacle and can come together to make a better world. But he also just came out of the atomic bombing of Japan. He was actually in the war, but he was in China during the war. He was in a POW camp. He got captured pretty early on. And he had been in a POW camp for like a good portion of the war, and he actually got along well with the people who had captured him. from what I recall from the biography, there's a great biography about Ishiro Honda. I highly suggest it. It's a great read. But yeah, he was in a POW camp and he learned a bit of Chinese, and he was excited about the concept of coming together across these horrible these borders of war. And so he was always he's a bit of a pacifist. He's a bit of an optimist, but he's also just witnessed the ultimate tragedy of a nation, the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah,
and it's hard to be optimistic in the face of that, especially as the Cold War begins to ramp up and more nuclear testings are done. The incident at the beginning of the film where the Lucky Dragon is destroyed by Godzilla, that's actually a reference to a nuclear testing that had been done shortly before the film was made, where a boat called the Lucky Dragon was caught up in a nuclear testing by Americans.
Oh wow!
So yeah, that's like a direct fear in the film of the ramping up nuclear tensions, and so that's where Serizawa sits, right? He's sitting as one of these great scientists who can do so much with the power of science, but he's created a weapon instead.
Yeah,
he hasn't figured out a way to make it not a weapon yet.
Yeah, like in a lot of ways, like several times throughout the film, I was comparing Serizawa to like Alfred Nobel, like who like, for those who don't know, created, like, he invented dynamite, and he's like, okay, there is no way people aren't going to use this to kill each other. and like he basically like, and not to say dynamite isn't a very useful tool, because it's helped us build like all sorts of tunnels, and like it really helped revolutionize like so much of our infrastructure today.
And it made Mythbusters possible.
Yeah. But like, you know, he's also not wrong. People love to blow each other up. So, you know, he kind of dedicated the rest of his life to like promoting peace and stuff. And like, I see a lot of those sorts of parallels with Serizawa. Like,
yeah,
he's made this incredible revolutionary thing, but like the bottom line is people are going to use it against each other if it gets into the wrong hands. And like he makes several points throughout the movie about like, you know, like, okay, if this gets out, like if you tell anyone else about this, or if I have to use this against Godzilla, I'm gonna have to like destroy all of my research, because that cannot get into the wrong hands. And then I'm also gonna have to not exist anymore, because even if I destroy my research, people can still like coerce me into helping them, and like, and which of course leads to his noble sacrifice at the very end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, just yeah.
Yeah, I love his noble his speech about humans are weak. But he's not saying that like humans are like bad or anything. He's saying like if I still exist, I can be coerced, I can be tortured, I can be bribed. They will find a way to get this out of me somehow.
Yep.
So as long as I still exist, there's a threat to the world. And that's such an interesting like way of putting it, right?
Yeah.
It's so this movie is very emotional. Like there's a lot of emotion that comes through. These actors are so wonderful.
Yeah.
Like every single thing has just comes with weight. And like in every single thing that happens in the movie, it feels full of intention. This is like something like if you look at like watch a movie like Creature from the Ocean Floor or The Snow Creature, you have a lot of scenes that's like, oh yeah, that was done to cut costs, right?
Yeah.
That was this is like an establishing shot, right? And you could describe scenes very simply that way, right? And like you could do that with Godzilla, but you'd be missing some of the context too.
Yeah.
Every scene feels like it has a little bit more going on to it. It's like there's an artistry to every aspect of every scene.
Like, honestly, like one of the first scenes of the movie that was very striking to me was when shortly after like the very opening scene where the ship gets destroyed, we have all these people that are like friends and family members and loved ones that are like waiting agonizingly for news about whether or not like their loved one was one of the survivors or not. And like these are all nameless faces to us, but like each individual person, I can see on their face like they're frantic, like, God, please tell me that like my father survived, or like my husband survived. Like I can see that on every person's face. And it's like in the grand scheme of the entire plot of the film, it seems like something so minor, and yet it's so well done.
Yeah. There's like that wasn't like you didn't even need to have that in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like utilitarian, like if you're trying to like just get the movie done, you have them like the people who are running the search for the ships being like, we lost another one and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But they adding the families wanting like begging for more information
Mm-hmm.
just like intensifies that a
Yeah.
bit. It makes you feel for it a bit more. It makes it feel real.
Mm-hmm. And like branching off of that, Japan as a country is very familiar with dealing with natural disasters. I mean, there is not a single country in the world that hasn't experienced a natural disaster, but Japan is like in a very particular place in the world where like they get hit by so many earthquakes and typhoons and like,
and their buildings are very prone to burning.
yep, like
The way they've built buildings for several hundred years is very fire oriented.
yeah, it's a country that honestly has been traumatized by fire, and so they're very like self-conscious about when things catch on fire.
Mm-hmm.
But like the point I'm getting to with this is like the entire first, I would say like maybe first third or so of the film feels so much like just a very realistic interpretation of a disaster response, which is not anything that I got from any of the other films we watched so far.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of it just has to do with that cultural like shared consciousness that Japan has about natural disasters that just does not get translated in American experiences when Americans make films.
Yeah. There's like a
yeah.
there's a really great part early on in the film that kind of feels like a direct answer or response to them in a way, even though it's clearly not, because the production schedule wouldn't have allowed for that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where the like head of the whatever council it is, I don't know if it's like the national council or if it's the city council of Tokyo or whatever. Whatever head of the governing body it is like, we now know about Godzilla and we should cover it up and not let everyone know because otherwise they would panic. But then a female like member of the opposing party is like, no, shut the fuck up. We have to tell. That's why we have to tell them.
Yeah.
Because it almost feels like a direct response to them. But it's also likely it's somewhat in response to the government tensions of the post-occupation Japan.
Yeah. Like
where I imagine there was quite a few screaming matches like that.
Yeah, and like so the term I just used, collective consciousness, like there's a lot of different ways I could apply it here. I may not be the best at explaining what exactly that is, but like for those who have not heard this term before, you may have heard claims or descriptions that say like, oh, Western society is very individualistic and Eastern society is very collectivist, and like that's a very watered down way to describe different cultures around the world, and it's not super accurate, but it does have some truth to it. And like collective unconsciousness is a term that kind of refers to where people
it's a cultural understanding.
Yeah, it's a cultural understanding. It's you don't have to put words to like an experience for everyone to know what that experience is like.
Like for a very benign example, like when an American thinks of food, they think of a burger.
Yeah.
Try explain collective consciousness. Okay, imagine a burger. But like, you know, in Japan, they would not think of a burger first, probably. Although these days they might, because of how much America has homogenized culture around the globe.
Yeah. Like, yeah, like they might think of probably rice would be the first thing that come into their mind, or like fish or miso. Like those are very common, like, parts of Japanese dishes, and you just say the word food and it's like, oh yeah, I know what food is. I eat it every day.
That wouldn't necessarily come into the head of even like a Chinese person, like, right? A person who was raised in China all their life is not going to think of the same things of a Japanese person, because they have different cultural expectations and, you know, understandings of you know, when like a word is just said to them.
Yeah.
But that even might change, like, if you're talking to a Japanese person who's learned English and you say the word food in English, they might think of a hamburger, right? They might associate the English word food with a hamburger, right? So it's not like a racial thing or anything like that. It is purely cultural.
Yeah.
It's not something innate to someone's being either. It is a learned association.
Yeah. But yeah, like the main reason I bring up the term is, like, I think going back to what you were just talking about earlier with the, like, we should hide this news from everyone so nobody panics. No, we should absolutely tell everyone so everyone knows. I think as you were saying before, just the time period of Japan, like 1950s, just has a very fresh memory of World War II and how it all ended, and how the
end of the fascist government they were just under,
and how the American occupation was. Like, a lot of people probably have this mindset of, like, if something is going on, I want to know. Like, I don't want any more information suppression. I don't want, like, people keeping, like, I don't want people to, like, specifically government. I don't want the government to keep me unaware of something that's very, like, gonna impact me.
I would also, like, not be surprised if the guy who was trying to cover it up wasn't directly based on Nobusuke Kishi.
Oh yeah.
You know, I can imagine Ishiro Honda having an issue with that guy. Not that he wrote the script. Remember, we have to also consider that there's a separate writer as well.
Yeah.
So, but, like, you know, Ishiro Honda has a great deal of influence on how things are portrayed in the film, and so his like thoughts kind of come through more so than even the writer does. And that's Takeo Murata is the original screenplay, and then Ishiro Honda does edits on it after that as part of his directorial duties. But he is credited as a screenplay writer as well, so he must have done some pretty significant ones, changes. But yeah, I can imagine him not liking Nobusuke Kishi, noted fascist war criminal turned parliamentarian in the occupation era, because we decided not to get rid of all of those guys for some reason.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like everything in this movie is like a little bit more than it first seems.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm always frustrated by Americans watching this movie. I'm almost always frustrated by Americans watching this movie because they don't understand. They don't get it. They see a guy in a dinosaur suit and they go, "Oh, well, this is a little bit silly." And like they didn't watch the girls singing the girls choir singing prayers of peace and get chills up the back of their spine. Like, come on. Every single time I watch that, chills all the way up the spine.
There really is not a single scene in this movie where I, like, I feel like, oh, haha, this like I shouldn't take this seriously. Like,
Yeah. Maybe some of the scenes with a puppet. I think some of the scenes with a puppet are a little bit silly.
yeah.
But even then, like it's packaged around all this very serious content.
Mm-hmm.
Like this very serious, like very important cinema. Cinema.
Yeah. Another striking scene to me was like, speaking of special effects, was when Godzilla was attacking the TV tower.
Mm.
And like, first of all, it was just kind of very satisfying to watch, just like visually him.
God, these miniatures are so fucking good.
Like
the metal bends like metal in the hands of a giant dinosaur.
Yeah, but like, and going into like the context of the scene where it's just a whole bunch of reporters like reporting on Godzilla destroying Tokyo, and then like when they realize that Godzilla has noticed them because their cameras are flashing, and that's annoying, and
no flash photography, folks. Come on.
please stop that.
That was almost certainly a pull from King Kong.
Yeah.
Because they had watched King Kong and Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and so there's a lot of things they've pulled directly from those movies. I'm sure that came from King Kong in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. So like they just kind of drew his attention, and he's like, "Rawr, I'm gonna kill you and just tear your TV tower down." But like it was the part of the scene that really struck me was how like the reporter was basically saying, "Okay, I might die here, but I'm gonna continue covering because the news is important."
He also realizes he doesn't have time to get out.
Yeah.
Anyways, he's like, "Okay,
yeah." It's like,
guess I'm here.
Well, this is how I'm gonna go.
I guess I should just try and cover this as long as I can."
Yeah. And yeah, just in some ways that was maybe a scene that I could like take a little bit less seriously than some of the other scenes, but it still carried emotional weight with me.
Yeah, I love that scene. I say I love that scene. I love every scene, every frame.
You love this movie, like the scene that is this movie.
Yeah, there's nothing in here that sucks. It's like everything is golden. There's the puppet's not great. The puppet's not great. But I kind of like it, even though it's kind of bad. I need someone to make me a little Godzilla puppet like that, a little Godzilla hand puppet so I can mess around with.
Yeah,
it can't be a hand puppet because it also has the arms, so it's got to have like there's a hand operating the mouth part of it for sure, and then there's like probably like two sticks operating the hands or something like that. I would imagine. I'm sure someone out there knows the answer, because this film has been probably one of the most documented films, like filmmakings of all time. We know like everything. I have like a whole book that's entirely about the making of this movie. I've got several books that cover this film's making as well, and then of course the biography of Ishiro Honda, the director. But yeah, what did you think of the underwater scenes?
I think they were pretty cool.
They're not as good as the ones in Monster from the Ocean Floor, at least not as clear.
Yeah,
but they have more purpose.
Yeah, definitely.
But you have to understand, like, that Ishiro Honda like developed the technology or like the techniques, I should say, for underwater filmmaking independently of American studios doing it.
Oh, okay.
So like, this was like his own. He developed them for a movie about pearl divers.
And
this was like, I think this was his second time using them.
Mm-hmm.
So they are going to look a little worse, but they do look quite nice still, and they're very there's the it's the scene of Sarazawa and Ogata, I believe his name, Ogata.
That sounds right to me.
Played by Akira Takarada. Yeah, Hideto Ogata
Mm-hmm.
is just one of the best. It's just the way Sarazawa sends Ogata back up and then cuts his own line so he has to stay down there.
Yeah.
Is just gut wrenching. And then, Dr. Yamane, the paleontology professor, who doesn't know about the love triangle. Which, by the way, we haven't talked about the love triangle. There's a love triangle in this movie. You've watched the movie, obviously, so you know this. And it's fucking great. It's the best love triangle ever written.
It's at least better than like most of the romance we've seen already in some of the other movies we watched.
Certainly. It's better than King Kong's.
Yeah.
Sure. God damn. But we have Emiko, Sarazawa, and Ogata. It's weird that we just call her Emiko, but if we just call her Yamane, then we would think we talk about the professor, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like we could use Emiko's first name, but not Ogata or Sarazawa, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, Ogata and Emiko actually love each other, whereas Sarazawa's too wrapped up in his work and too scarred by the war. I think that's like the implication of his eye patch. Like the eye patch came from the war, not from being a mad scientist.
No, he just like started doing science, and he's like, "Hey, you know what I could use? I could use an eye patch."
But I think his experience in the war is what made him so distant, and then the fact that he has this burden on him of this science, this knowledge that he cannot unveil.
Yeah,
which is why he confides in Emiko in the first place.
Yeah, and like that honestly really makes a lot more sense for like the weight of his understanding that like if this gets into the wrong hands, it's done for. And he's probably seen torture too, which is how he knows that if he's still around later, that people would be able to get the secrets out of him.
Yeah.
Again,
but yeah, you have
like as you said several times, every scene in this movie, like every detail goes deeper.
Yeah. You have this tension though between Emiko's, like I don't know if if it was an arranged marriage or if it's just something that Dr. Yamane would like to see happen.
Mm-hmm.
And Emiko and Sarazawa had met normally or something, and then Sarazawa went off to war or something. I don't know exactly the details here. They don't really go into them because it's not really necessary. But you have this tension between this like loveless, but promised relationship, and then this extra not marital, but they haven't married yet, but they're like engaged to be married. This extra not quite marital affair with a man she actually does love, who also happens to work at the Coast Guard, which gets him involved in the plot.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting love triangle, and it's very well done. And just like with all the emotions that this film portrays, like I get the sense of emotion from like between the characters, like unlike the other a lot of the previous movies we watched, where I could just like kind of poke fun at a lot of the romance in those films. This one like actually was like it's both like sweet and tragic. It's like bittersweet.
Yeah. I love how they never actually get to tell Sarazawa what's going on between them.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarazawa can tell anyways.
Yeah.
And so when he does his sacrifice, he says, "Take care of her for me," right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just so fucking juicy. Oh my
Yeah.
god, it's delicious. Num num num. Give me more, please. It's God. Everything in this movie is like it's the difference between a dry fast food meal and then a nice succulent Chinese meal.
Yes.
Sorry, I had to make a succulent Chinese meal joke for some reason. I don't know why I had to go to that fucking reference. But anyways, it's like just like getting something that's like everything is just packed full of flavor versus just like
Mm-hmm.
you got something sad from like what's like the saddest restaurant I could think of?
White Castle.
Burger King. White Castle, even worse. Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Because like Burger King at least has okay chicken.
And Burger King's got the Impossible Whopper.
And the Impossible Whopper tastes better than their actual burgers, from what I understand.
Yeah.
I don't eat beef, but I like the Impossible Whopper. All right, it was fine. It was certainly a burger you could have. Speaking of burgers, though, what'd you think of the music of this movie?
Oh, spot on. Like every, like going back to the previous movies we watched, like some of them had decent music.
King Kong was probably the best.
Yeah, but
it was all synced together.
But even then, it does not compare. Like literally every scene in this movie had the right atmosphere with its sound. And
yeah, even when it decided to just not play any music and it was just the sounds of the carnage of Godzilla.
Yeah, like even when the movie decided to just be quiet in the background versus when it had dramatic music playing or like uplifting music or like the thing is, even the scenes where it did have some uplifting music, it still felt
bittersweet.
Yeah, like just this movie has a fantastic score.
The Godzilla soundtrack is a bit like jazz in that it's about the notes you don't play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's also about the notes you do play, because Akira Ifukube's score is fantastic. I cannot sing the praises of Akira Ifukube enough. He is such a fantastic composer. He's always been my favorite composer ever since I was a little kid. His symphonic fantasias, which are basically just collections of his Godzilla music, are some of the best pieces of classical music ever put to score.
Mm-hmm.
He really does a good job of blending Western classical music and Japanese sensibilities for music.
Yeah.
An interesting thing about him is he actually grew up in Hokkaido.
Oh.
So he had a lot of exposure to Ainu music as well.
Nice.
So when you hear more traditional music, it's actually not like traditional Japanese music. It's more likely influenced by traditional Ainu music.
That's really cool.
The little ceremony they do to scare off Godzilla with the dance, like to appease Godzilla with their ritual dance.
Yeah,
has a little da 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 da. That's probably more influenced by Akira Ifukube's time studying Ainu music than it is by traditional Japanese music. Especially since it's an island off the coast of Japan, Odo Island specifically, but that's not like a real island. I'm pretty sure it's not a real island.
Mm-hmm.
I've always understood it to not be a real island. They just made it up for the movie.
Yeah.
And a lot of the islands off the coast of Japan, or further, if you get to Ryukyu, or Okinawa for you gaijin. No, Ryukyu is what they call it. I like to try and call things. I wish I remembered the name that Ainu called Hokkaido, because they do have a name for Hokkaido, and I really prefer to call it by the Ainu name than the Japanese name, considering the Japanese colonized it. But that's like the right reason I call it Ryukyu instead of Okinawa. But anyways, the a lot of the islands off the coast of Japan have slightly different cultures from the mainland Yamato culture, right? I mean, hell, because when you like go back to the history of Japan, the Yamato culture, the it came after people were already there for a while, people who were more related to the Ainu culture, and then they exterminated them and intermarried with them.
Yeah.
A little bit of both, a little bit of genocide, a little bit of fucking, you know.
Okay, I have no idea if this is accurate or not, but just a quick Google search, I get Aino Moksori or Moshori or something like that.
That's very possible, because I remember correctly, the name for it is basically like Ainu home.
Yeah, land
The
of the
home of the
Ainu.
Yeah, that would be it then.
But yeah.
So yeah, like that's like, so you know, when he's trying to pull for one of those kind of cultures that is close to Japan but not Japanese, like by not this like descended from the Yayoi kingdom, you know, Yamato race, quote unquote, you know. He I think he pulls from the Ainu experiences more so than any like traditional Japanese music.
Yeah.
We're gonna see this a lot more with Mothra when we get to Mothra.
Oh, I'm excited for that. I'm just excited to hear more of this guy's music.
Oh man, once he's got some great pieces that are coming up. They're gonna, so basically for the most of the Showa era of Godzilla movies, it's like mostly Akira Ifukube music, and even in the ones where it's not, oftentimes they'll throw in a couple of his tracks. And he actually comes back for the Heisei era as well, partway through, and does some music that is revamped versions of his old stuff, and then does some new things as well. It's really cool. And then of course we have the symphonic fantasias, which are just big like collections of his music made into like a big like one piece together. So there's like 3 of those. So and those are fantastic. I love them. But yeah, Akira Ifukube, I can't sing his praises enough. Such an interesting composer, and that he's part of what makes Godzilla Godzilla, not just in the fact that he, you know, had made the music that made it so iconic. All the iconic Godzilla pieces are Akira Ifukube, but also he made Godzilla's roar.
Oh.
So
yeah, you did mention you were going to explain to me more about the roar.
Yeah, that was the one thing I hid from you instead of just telling you then and there. Akira Ifukube developed an interest. So he was brought on to do the soundtrack. He actually got really excited when he heard that the main character was a monster. Although I would argue the main character is Emiko, but
yeah,
potato, you know. We'll get back to that too, by the way, because I want to talk about the human stories versus monster stories. But anyways, there was a couple of people tasked with making the roar for Godzilla. They decided to make Godzilla roar, even though reptiles don't actually roar; they more hiss, if anything.
Yeah, but that wouldn't have been as exciting.
Exactly, and that's what Ishiro Honda knew. So he decided to do a roar. And he had some people on the special effects that were doing the work for doing that. And they got a bunch of recordings of animals and stuff, but nothing really worked out right. So Akira Ifukube got interested in the idea of making the roar. And what he did is he took a contrabass, which is a big, it's like a big violin. If you don't know if you don't know what it is, it's a big bass violin, giant, like huge. Contrabasses are like,
yeah,
you gotta sit in a special chair.
They're like the biggest string instrument, or
pretty much, yeah.
Not
biggest Western string instrument. Of the violin
biggest
family.
One that's like likely to be in an orchestra. Well, that doesn't. What you know, like biggest one that looks like a violin. There we go.
Yeah, and so he takes that, he loosens the strings of it, and then takes a resin glove and rubs it down the strings, and then slows that audio down to make the roar.
Huh.
So that's why it kind of has a little bit. If you listen carefully, it sounds a little bit like strings, and that's because it is.
Okay.
So yeah, he's that's how the original Godzilla roar is made.
That's really cool.
I think that's basically how they made it, like, for a lot of the other ones too, but they kind of eventually started doing different. They had like different technology with which to edit the roar, so they could make it look sound a little bit less scary. This one's terrifying, right?
Yeah.
this one has a lot of fear in it. Whereas later ones are going to be more aimed at children, and so are going to be a little less scary. I shouldn't say this, but because we're gonna get this again in a later movie, but this is how a lot of the monster roars are made, with just using instruments. We're gonna have Anguirus in the next movie, and Anguirus is actually a saxophone that's been distorted by some audio editing. Like, they slowed it down, and they made it like out of pitch and everything, and then they slowed it down.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting way of making monster noises, which is why, like, the Toho monster noises sound so much different than a lot of American monsters do, right?
Because I'm so used to hearing like the background of special effects, like, oh, this one they used like a chainsaw, or like I don't know, like they
took an elephant noise and they combined it with like a shoe bill, and then they they just like did a lot of audio editing to it, right?
Or like, yeah, just all sorts of weird, crazy things that you wouldn't even think of for making sounds, and like, but yeah, like they like do this weird, convoluted, like, combining different noises from two unrelated objects. And I'm not super used to hearing that, like, people just used an actual instrument and tested its limits to like replicate a sound that they wanted to make.
Yeah. By the way, to make this all more impressive, Ifukube was never actually shown the final film when he was making the music, and he only had a week to compose it. He was only shown a model of Godzilla and the screenplay.
Oh my gosh.
He was briefly shown some footage with the effects missing, and then Eiji Tsuburaya, the effects man, described what the effects would look like. So Ifukube recalls, I was very confused, so I tried to make music that would remind you of something enormous. Which, by the way, we got to talk about Tsuburaya. So Eiji Tsuburaya is the effects man on this film. He was actually not a Toho Studios employee. A lot of these other, like, the directors weren't exactly employees, but they weren't not employees either. They were on contract work, but they would work with one studio for a while, right?
Yeah.
Because in Japan the monopoly laws are different. Film studios also own film film theaters. And so they have a much stronger grip on the market and their employees. Which is what allowed it's like that sounds awful, right? It's like terrible. It is, but it also is what allowed them to survive Hollywood coming in. So it's like because since they controlled the theaters, they were able to control what movies were shown in those theaters, right?
Yeah.
So if, like, obviously they let the American films come in, but they were making the profit off of that. Or at least they were making some of the profit, right? Which allows them to survive and continue to make their own films. And then they could also be like, well, we're going to show your American films, but we're also going to make sure that ours get shown, and more often than yours.
Yeah.
So it worked in a weird way to preserve Toho Studios as an indigenous film studio to Japan, But Tsuburaya was not actually part of that system. Tsuburaya had actually been booted out of Toho Studios because he made propaganda films during the war for Toho Studios.
Hmm.
Toho Studios had made Subaraya, and they paid him to, right? They didn't force him to, but they paid him to make propaganda films for the Japanese war effort during the war. And then they booted him because he was known for making propaganda films at that point, and they didn't want that tarnishing their relationship with the occupation government. And so Subaraya made his own studio, his own effects studio. And then Toho contracted out to him because he's an incredible effects artist. He's actually so good that he got investigated by the U.S. War Department.
Okay.
See, he made a film, I think it's what was it called? It was Okinawa to Hawaii, I think is what it was called. Which was a film about Pearl Harbor from the Japanese perspective during the war.
All right.
And the effects were so good and were so accurate that the U.S. War Department assumed he must have known state secrets and held him and investigated him to possibly be charged as a war criminal.
Oh my god.
Which is crazy.
And
what's funny is it's not even the craziest thing about Toho. Did you know there was also a second Toho Studios called Shin Toho? Which is just new Toho for those who don't know Japanese.
I think you may have mentioned them to me at one point or another.
I might have, because this is the craziest thing ever. Shin Toho is the communist version of Toho Studios.
Oh.
All of the communist people who worked at Toho Studios just decided to leave. They did a strike, but then they decided to just leave in general and form their own studio. There was enough of them that they were able to break off and make Shin Toho. And so they just made their own. That's where Kurosawa went for a while. And Ishiro Honda was offered, Kurosawa kept trying to get Ishiro Honda to go there, but Ishiro Honda stayed with Toho instead of going to Shin Toho. Now, eventually, Shin Toho does dissolve and just basically gets reabsorbed back into Toho. That was in the late 50s, I want to say. But it is a very funny period of time. There was just two Tohos, and one of them was communist.
I love me a communist Japanese movie studio.
But yeah, I guess now we can come back around to, now that we've talked about some of the people who worked on this, like Eiji Tsuburaya and Akira Fukube. We talked a little bit about Ishiro Honda as well. We can talk about this idea of the people versus monsters, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of Americans don't understand the way Godzilla films work, right? Because I always hear this complaint. I always hear this complaint, especially when it comes to newer movies that come out that are Godzilla movies. And it's always this: Godzilla was only in that for 30 minutes. It's an hour 30-minute film. Why is he only in it for 30 minutes? What? I don't care about the human plot. What do I care about the human plot for? And I guess got to say to you, are you 12? Grow up.
Yeah.
The actual plot is the human plot. Godzilla is a force that acts upon the human plot.
And just in a lot of ways, there's a lot that can be shown by not being shown. Or, if that makes sense. You can say a lot about something by not showing it.
The beginning of the film. Godzilla terrorizing the boats and the village of Odo Island, but not being shown until the famous mountain scene.
Yeah. And with them, basically the first, what was it, 20 minutes of the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, the first 20 minutes of the movie, we have no sightings of the giant ants, but we hear them. And it kind of, by not showing you something, it implies
more than they can show.
It implies, and it also lets you use your imagination more. Like,
that's what I mean by it implies more than they can show,
yeah,
because the ant effects are not particularly good. They're
yeah.
doing the best they can. So
So,
they could do more terrifying things by not showing you the ants and
yep.
implying that they're there than by actually showing you the ants that can't move very well and just bobble their head back and forth.
Yeah. So like even with its like functional reason for them to do that, it also just like it makes the viewer crave like, oh my god, I want to like what beast could possibly be making that sound that I keep hearing, that's like killing these police officers or whatever. And like, yeah, just not showing us something outright is tends to give it a better effect. And it also makes a payoff so much more worth it once you finally do see, oh my god, that's Godzilla, or like, oh my god, those are the giant ants. And it also, in a way too, it also like it sort of makes you appreciate it more when you do finally see it, because you spent this much time anticipating getting to see the monster, that like even if the special effects aren't that amazing, you still get like you're able to hold back some of that disbelief and just be like, oh my god, this is kind of so cool.
It's the sunk cost fallacy in a way.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. It really is kind of.
It's also just like the anticipation tingles, like just
Yeah.
exciting, you know. But it's also in a way a little bit of a sunk cost fallacy, like working for you instead of against you.
But yeah, like the movie just kind of edges you, and
and baby, you're not going to come until they want you to. Why do we keep coming back to this?
Hi, Mom.
Oh,
but yeah, no, like, but yeah, just and so there's actually a movie. I don't remember what the movie is, and it's also a movie I haven't seen, but I've heard this particular like review of it that like made me think a little bit. I want to say the movie was Cloverfield. I could be completely wrong about that. Where basically like there's this kind of like giant monster that they're like, that's like the antagonist of the film essentially, and
giant monster 9/11.
Like you barely see any of it in the movie.
Yeah,
it's
like
that's
Cloverfield. We're gonna take a look at that at some point.
Awesome.
10 million years from now.
Yeah, like it's just there's a lot that can be done by letting the viewer use their imagination. And also I want to step outside the kaiju scene here for a bit and be like, you know, one of my favorite animated series of all time, Avatar: The Last Airbender, does something similar where basically like the big bad of like the entire plot, the like Fire Lord Ozai, he like you don't get to see his face until much later into the show, because it pushes you to like use your imagination more. Like, oh my god, this antagonist is so insanely powerful and scary that like I'm not even allowed to see him. And yeah, it's a really cool way of doing a villain or antagonists. Is to just like hide it from you.
Yeah. And like, you know, we'll be getting into kaiju movies where they're not, kaijus aren't so much antagonists as they are pro wrestlers. But like, even with that, the human plot is still like the plot that we are following.
Mm-hmm.
Kaijus are actors upon the plot, right?
Yeah.
And the when Godzilla's absent, it's not like the fucking Homer thing where it's like when he's off the screen, everyone should be asking, where's Godzilla? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's a matter of you gotta have things that are not Godzilla for the Godzilla stuff to be special.
Mm-hmm.
And also you gotta have like an actual plot. And Godzilla's a fucking dinosaur, and so he's not gonna have a very interesting plot.
Godzilla doesn't have a whole lot to say except for roar.
Like, Godzilla decides to go fuck up some other kaiju's day is not a very compelling plot. I'm sorry.
Say that to some WWE fans listening.
Even WWE has storylines. They realized that wrestling by itself was just kind of boring. You need to have something else to catch people's attention every single night.
Yeah.
You know, to get them watching every single show, you have to have storylines.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that with a dinosaur, you can't have very complex storylines. But with people, you know, you can,
mm-hmm.
which is why they have the human plots. They're very essential.
And also just like in general, it has a lot to do with like the themes of like, why are we even having a kaiju in the first place? And like it's this like man versus nature or man versus like super nature, like and like these sorts of conflicts that like kind of bring humanity together and also make humans fight each other. Like it also brews conflicts just to have an enemy or an adversary that you need to overcome. And
yeah,
it complicates things.
In the kaiju film, the kaiju is more of a metaphor than a character,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's like the where it is. Like that's
Yeah.
The kaijus can be characters, especially monsters like Gamera, which we're going to come in contact with later. But for the most part, the kaiju is a metaphor or a plot device that acts upon the character,
Mm-hmm.
that makes them do things, right?
Yeah.
That makes the film happen.
Like I probably don't even need to say this because I'm sure this is like the most commonly known like what Godzilla is a metaphor for, but like Godzilla is just a metaphor for the nuclear bomb and like what it does to the environment, what it does to people, like the destruction that it causes, the devastation, and like kind of also that opening the Pandora's box of like, well, now what does our future have in store now that we have this technology that we couldn't even fathom a decade ago? And like, how does that impact our human characters?
Yeah. And I think that's like the obvious thing that Godzilla is, right? But we also have, there's also more to Godzilla as well.
Yeah.
Godzilla is American nuclear testing.
Mm-hmm.
He's quite literally the Lucky Dragon incident.
Yeah.
Right. And the encroaching American nuclear tests as the Soviet Union and America, who Japan finds himself smack in the middle of.
Mm-hmm.
It's a ramp up,
and like it's literally one of the reasons why the Americans went so quote unquote easy on Japan right after the war. It's because they kind of wanted to butter them up to have a Japan shaped shield against the Soviet Union.
And also part of the reason for dropping the atomic bombs in the first place.
Yeah.
Even though they probably really didn't need them.
Mm-hmm.
Almost certainly, in fact, didn't need them.
Yep.
To get Japan to surrender. They just wouldn't want the Soviet Union to have a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like they did in Germany. And that's not, and the funny thing is like, that's not even the end of what Godzilla is either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Godzilla is also the Tokyo fire bombings.
Yeah.
Like
he literally sets Tokyo on fire.
He literally sets Tokyo on fire. And you have all these scenes of the camera panning over Tokyo completely lit up on fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what a nuclear bomb does.
Yeah.
But that is what the Americans did to Tokyo during the war.
And fun fact, killed more people than the nuclear bombs.
As you might expect, frankly. Because they burned all of Tokyo. Almost all of Tokyo. Toho Studios was fine, actually. But Toho Studios, I actually went to Toho Studios this year on my trip to Japan, and it's a little farther out. It's like a good 30 minutes by train from like anywhere that you know as Tokyo, right? Shinjuku or Akihabara or anywhere like that. It's like a good 30 minutes out from all of that.
Yeah. By the way, when Ian says this year, for those of you listening when this episode first drops, that's actually last year.
Shit. I forgot. Damn it. Oh. Happy New Year's.
Yeah, no, it's... Yeah.
Hey, old Godzilla be forgot.
Yeah, no, it's... Yeah, Godzilla is just a metaphor for a lot of things, and I do really think he also represents a lot of honestly, it almost feels like Godzilla could even be a foreshadowing of Fukushima. If we were to if I don't know, if Godzilla didn't exist and then the Fukushima incident happened and then Godzilla were to be released, it would be fitting.
I want you to take that thought and I want you to hold it in your heart until we watch Shin Godzilla.
Okay.
Because that's going to be very relevant. I'll just tell you, the movie came out in that movie Shin Godzilla came out in 2016. So.
Okay. Yep.
And it was the first Godzilla movie that was made in Japan since 2004.
All right.
They brought Godzilla out of the grave to make a movie right after Fukushima. I wonder what it's about. I can't wait for that one. Shin Godzilla is such a good movie. It's a Godzilla tier movie. It is up there. Hideaki Anno doing amazing things. I still need to see Shin Ultraman too. Oh man, I need.
There's a Shin Ultraman.
Yes, and there's a Shin Kamen Rider.
Oh.
And then there's the Neon Genesis Evangelion rebuilds, which is why they had that big statue when I was in Japan that had all four of them: Godzilla, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and the Eva Unit 1 all together.
Oh my god, I wanna see Shin Ultraman. That sounds so cool.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not going to watch a whole lot of Ultraman because it is a TV show, but there are a couple of movies here and there we'll be dipping into.
Oh my gosh.
That's Eiji Tsuburaya.
For those who don't know, I actually love Ultraman. I talk about my love for Ultraman a whole lot less than I talk about my love for Power Rangers, but I love them both. I just love Japanese action. It's so good. It's so good.
But yeah, Ultraman was made by Eiji Tsuburaya, who did the effects for this movie. And that's why there's so many reused Godzilla costumes in that series. Eiji Tsuburaya is a hardcore Catholic, by the way.
Oh.
Or was. He's dead now.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of Catholic symbolism in the Ultraman franchise. Really comes through there. I should stop doing fun facts because we are like 20 minutes over the normal time, and we should like start like getting our final thoughts out about Godzilla.
I mean, this was a special episode. This was
for sure. I knew it was going to go long. I always knew it was going to go long, but we should at this point we should probably stop getting off topic at least.
Yeah, we in an hour and a half we cannot cover everything there is to say about Godzilla. Obviously. I have a feeling we'll have more to say about it as we like watch the next two times.
And we're gonna have to like talk about the changes because there's like, gonna be some significant changes with these next two versions of the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and most of them not good.
But yeah, just overall. Best movie out of all the kaiju movies we've seen so far.
I it's my favorite movie. Like it's just straight up my favorite movie of all time.
Mm-hmm. I can see why. It's a very good movie. And,
I always have like a juggle of like which one is my favorite? Is it Godzilla the original? Is it Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monster, All Out Attack? And yes, that is the whole title of that movie. Or is it Shin Godzilla?
Mm-hmm.
I think it is this original one because, man, it just hits like nothing else.
Yeah.
There's just like a realness that Ishiro Honda is so good at hitting.
Oh yeah.
Which is why Kurosawa liked him so much.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Ishiro Honda, later in his career, after he stopped doing Godzilla films, would work with Kurosawa on several of his movies.
This is the exact reason why we started this podcast. It's so Ian could be autistic to me about kaiju.
This is what I really wanted to get to, was the actual Godzilla movies.
Yeah.
Like this is like when you think about this is why we call it kaiju. Godzilla, this movie right here, Godzilla, the original 1954 Godzilla, is why we call it kaiju and not big monsters, giant monsters. You know, if King Kong had been like the true gold standard of kaiju, we would not be calling them kaiju in America. We would just be calling them giant monsters. But there's something about Godzilla that's just a little bit better, a little bit more powerful, and I think it is. It's that post-war Japan element to it, and Ishiro Honda's brilliant directing, and Eiji Tsurai's brilliant effects, and Akira Ifukube's brilliant score.
Yeah, like, and you really put it really well there, because like there's just something lacking in all the American films that we watched that's like, you know, 1930s and 40s and 50s that just, I don't know, maybe it's me like living in America and growing up here where I just kind of like, I'm kind of tired of the bullshit, but
well, it's like, think about it, like, what are Americans afraid of, right? What do Americans have to be afraid of in
Communism.
the 30s and 40s? Communism and black people. Like, that's all they're afraid of, and it's like stupid, irrational fears that I don't give a shit about.
Yeah.
Whereas Godzilla, it's a country destroyed by war and destroyed by the atomic bomb specifically. And a national trauma, you know?
Like,
and that's so much more compelling.
And brings back the collective unconscious of like, what do you think as an American when you hear the word World War II, whereas what do you think of as a Japanese person when you hear World War II? Yeah.
Like, do you think of General Patton and Rommel like duking it out in the desert, or do you think of nuclear destruction of your family?
Yeah. Yep.
Me personally, because I'm a Soviet historian, I think of the Eastern Front, really, but I think of the T-34 and I go, ooh, I like T-34s, you know.
Yeah.
Or a KV2. Oh, give me a KV2. I'll fucking ride that baby. They put a fucking howitzer on that motherfucker. God damn.
You need to play this visual novel dating sim called Panzer Mädels that lets you
I already
date.
watched Girls in Panzer. I don't need to be doing more.
It lets you date a T-34.
Oh, T-34 with your sloped front. That makes it hard for the stupid German tanks to pierce you. Who cares about the high firepower of a Panzer if you've got a sloped front that just deflects it all? The genius of the T-34 is that they looked at medieval armor and were like, oh, what the sloped front of armor makes it work better. And meanwhile, the Germans are like, we made it bigger and now it gets stuck in the mud. Oopsie.
Ian is much more of a military historian than I am.
I just like tanks.
For me,
tanks are cool.
Don't
ask me about planes or ships, though.
Oh yeah, actually, no. I know more about planes. Actually, planes are kind of very cool. I like planes.
The only planes I know are the ones that Sky Striker Ace Ray turns into in her mobile in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game. and of course the Zero. Everyone knows the Zero.
Yeah.
But like the Shizuku, the Kagari. that's all I know. It's the Kaina. Thank you, Yu-Gi-Oh. We got off topic again.
We did.
Like really far.
I mean, there's a whole lot more to say, but I don't think we can really say it in the next 3 minutes. So
yeah, I mean, like I think some of this stuff we'll be able to talk about again in the next film, because it is just the same film again, but with some added scenes and some deleted scenes, which are really going to I don't want to preemptively like prepare you for what's ahead, but I do want to just like get out in front of it. It's like we're gonna kind of ruin the vibe a little bit. And it's just like a really weird quirk of American like import culture at the time, but we'll get into that more next time with Godzilla, and not Gojira, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. They added that little subtitle there, and that kind of stuck.
See, like even the Americans were like, you know what, King Kong is a king, but you know what else is a king? Godzilla.
It's really interesting because Godzilla is just an Americanization of Gojira, right? It's just Godzilla instead of Gojira, right? So it fits the mouth shapes really well for dubbing purposes.
Yeah.
But it also has the word God in there, and Zilla, which is a fun like little suffix that we use now. Like every time you call something a blank Zilla, that's because of Godzilla. And then the God part is just like, yeah, it's a fucking God.
Yeah.
That's like an important aspect of Godzilla as a kaiju, by the way, is that like you can't kill Godzilla. He's not just a dinosaur, he's Godzilla. And that's like an important aspect of him in this movie because he's not a dinosaur, he's the atomic bomb. And so Ishiro Honda specifically wanted to give him some of the invulnerability feel of the atomic bomb instead of just being a dinosaur that you could kill. Which is what makes him different than some of the kaiju we looked at earlier. And it's going to start to impact the way that kaiju monsters are made in the future. It's going to become a bit of a staple of the genre that the monsters are basically indestructible. Not that we haven't had some mostly indestructible monsters.
Yeah.
But we're going to see more indestructible monsters as we go on from here.
All right.
Ones that basically can't be stopped by any means. Except for the Oxygen Destroyer. You know, something like that. You know, you have to come up with some stupid bullshit.
Well, you know, you gotta have the Deus Ex Machina and
Deus Ex Oxygen.
Yeah, and you know, there's also the reason why they had to like get like get rid of it. You know, it was too powerful.
Oh man, I can't wait for us to do Godzilla versus Destroyer because we're gonna come back to the Oxygen Destroyer.
Oh.
And it's so good. I love the way they handle it in that movie. And I hate the way they handle it in the American movies.
Mm.
The most recent American ones. I hate most of the American movies except for the very first one, the 2014 one. That one's actually not bad. But the people who complained about there not being enough Godzilla and there being too much of the human plot are what made the rest of them bad because they listened to the criticism and they decided to not care about the human plot. They made it stupid and nonsensical. I have feelings about the American Godzilla films, but we'll get to those much later. God, I'm so glad to be talking about Godzilla finally. And we're going to talk about it a lot. Any last thoughts?
I'm excited that we finally made it into Godzilla. Because I've been highly anticipating this. And
so
I'd never seen Godzilla before.
Yeah, that's true. I'm curious though. Are you what's the feeling going into 2 more viewings of this with slightly worse versions?
So like on one hand I'm actually kind of optimistic about kind of rewatching this 2 more times just because like I want to like catch some of the things that I missed.
Unless it was cut from the film.
Yeah, unless it was cut in, which is also like, yeah, I guess we'll see. Like, because the way you put it makes it sound like a lot of stuff has been changed. And I'm just kind of
new scenes.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering.
Scenes that are gone. I'm really curious to see how you react to it. I think it's going to be really interesting. But that'll be next time. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and then after that, Kozilla, the Italian recut of Godzilla, which is slightly different from the American version, and in colorized in the most technicolor way possible. It's very strange. I can't wait to watch it. But yeah, that'll be next time. For now, I think it's finally time to do plugs and get out of here. Thank you all so much for watching. We're glad to finally be here, 8 episodes in to Godzilla. And from here on out, it's gonna be better stuff every once in a while. There's still gonna be some stinkers in there, I'm pretty sure. But I genuinely don't think that any of the Godzilla films are stinkers except for maybe exactly one of them. Which is like mostly a clip show of other Godzilla films, and that's pretty rough. But other than that, I think a lot of them have something in them that is worth watching. They might not be good films, but they have something in there that's like, oh yeah, that's cool. Which is usually the effects. Because the effects are they might be a little cheesy, but like they're still fun. They're so well done, right? Eiji Tsuburaya is the master of miniatures, and nobody's done it better than him. Oh, wait, I forgot to mention, speaking of Eiji Tsuburaya's effects, there was a little bit of stop-motion animation in the film.
Oh?
The Godzilla tail, when the Godzilla wags his tail and uses it to smash into a building, that was stop-motion animation. So they could do it. But like honestly, I think it's kind of one of the worst effect shots in the film, besides maybe the hand puppet. So I think they made the right choice. I mean, for one, they made the right choice because it would have taken them way too long to make it stop motion. Eiji Tsuburaya estimated it would have taken them 7 years to complete the movie. But also, I think frankly the suit actually looks really good, and the miniatures look incredible. And I think that was just the right move to go. And that stop motion animation kind of looked, I don't know. To me, stop motion animation is good if you're just doing it as animation, but if you're trying to make it look realistic, I think it looks kind of bad to me. But maybe that's just because I'm used to suits,
Yeah.
It's my it's my collective conscious. My collective conscious is more aligned with Japan on that front. Anyways, we're out of here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, or listening, sorry. I always do that. I hope you enjoyed, and if you like this, share it around. This is the best way for us to get in front of new listeners, and give the YouTube video a like and comments and stuff like that. Give us a review on iTunes and all that stuff. It's really the best way to help this podcast grow. And you do want us to grow, right? If we don't grow, we might die. And you don't want us to die, do you? Do you? Okay. But we really do appreciate it, though. It's good stuff. It helps us a lot, and we appreciate it.
Yeah.
If you do leave a review, we'll read it on the air, like on iTunes. I do check that every once in a while. I should be checking it before every podcast, but I forget to. You can follow the podcast on YouTube at thempodian. That's the YouTube channel we post the podcast. And of course, you can find it in any podcast app. If you need to switch apps, we're there. Mm-hmm. Except for iHeartRadio. That one didn't work out for some reason. Ripperoni. And then, where can people find you, Haru?
So I am Haru Hayes. You can find me on most social media. I'm on... I almost said Twitter. I'm not really on Twitter anymore. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Twitch. I'm on Discord. Those are the 3 main places you can find me. Blue Sky, I'm haru.vspire.live is my new handle where you can find me. And everywhere else, I'm just Haru Hayes. And yeah, I stream occasionally, and I'm just a cute puppy girl that does gay things.
Mm-hmm. And you can find me at Thempire Iain just about anywhere. You'll also find the podcast, of course, on Thempod Iain, and any other podcasts that I do will be there, and my secondary channel, Tomb of Thempire Iain, where all my Let's Plays go. The main channel is for Yu-Gi-Oh! And video essays and the like. And then, of course, I'm on every social media. It's just Thempire Iain. And that's where you can find me. I'm also on Twitch, too, at Thempire Iain as well. It's Thempire Iain. If you do Thempire Iain, you'll generally find me. That's about it for us. I said that like an alien. That's about it for us. That's about it for it. That's about it for us. So I think it's time to finally say goodbye to Godzilla for the first time and not the last. Sayonara, Godzilla.
Sayonara, Godzilla.
I don't even have a joke for this one. This is just a good fucking movie.